It's important to note that Mount Auburn was established in 1872.
Mount Auburn Cemetery is the size of the old city of Jerusalem, 32 acres.
What people don't understand is that here, Sharp Street United Methodist Church has the sole responsibility to not only keep the church going and hire a minister and do all of those things, but the entire maintenance and upkeep of Mount Auburn Cemetery.
The cemetery has been in serious disrepair for some time.
When I got there, I saw the condition of the cemetery. The weeds were at least 3 to 4 feet high.
I tell you that with that harbor view there at Mount Auburn, there's going to be efforts, which they're already making, to put in and bring in and gentrify this area.
Mount Auburn is in a location of the city that's going through the beginnings of transformation, changes in the commercial structure, changes in the industrial uses, but mostly in changes of who lives there.
Our students are going to be working on some of the, vision that Sharp Street, the church, has for the cemetery. It's not like you have a vacant piece of land which has no spirit, which has no memories, which has no history. So you just can't place things everywhere. It has to be done in a very sensitive way, in limited space. It's going to be a real challenge to do this planning in a sensitive, respectful manner that respects the past but looks to the future.
Courts of this state allow these speculators to come and encroach on hallowed ground of African Americans. Laurel Cemetery's land was purchased by African Americans and simply to create a shopping center. The disrespect shown, and this is why the parallels that they have to watch out for Mount Auburn, not everybody was removed from Laurel. So to this day, on a warm summer day, various parts of these bodies protrude through the asphalt on a warm summer day and come up out of the ground. I was in Africa recently, and some of the elders told me that you Americans of African descent don't know who you are. And that's so true.
We have legendary leaders, not only for our city, but for our nation, who are buried there. And the landscape suggests that we've been negligent toward them. And we need to renew the landscape in order to give the kind of dignity.
And that there were a lot of people buried in that cemetery that are very well known and have left a major legacy for Baltimore City, for the state of Maryland, for the United States, period. I also discovered that there were different kinds of burial sites there. Some that were very European in nature, some that were very African in nature, some plants that were not indigenous to the area that had been imported. There's all kinds of things happening out at Mount Auburn Cemetery. It has a wonderful view of the harbor, and if you're right on that crest and you can look out over the city of Baltimore, it is fabulous. For
African Americans, there's this kind of tie to water that other people might not understand. So when you're standing there in the cemetery and you're on this hill, you have this great connection of the water, it's really special. When you're walking by the vault building, which the minister talked about, if you focus on the vault itself, even though the building's in ruins, its architecture and the way it stands upon the land, you'll lose yourself and feel you're on an African plain. Even in its present condition, has this kind of spiritual sense. It has a special ambiance, which has to be really respected. And yes, around it, there's a different world when you get outside of the cemetery. There's a world that's being encroached upon by development. There's a lot of waterfront development in Baltimore, and now that a certain part of the harbor has been taken up already, this is the last great place for development to happen.
I think it's incumbent upon all of us that have an interest in that goal to lend a hand in whatever way we can to do that. I'm happy to see that the architectural department of Morgan State University is involved in this process of laying out a plan for the cemetery.
in terms of its placement in Baltimore, in terms of its size, in terms of its layout, in terms of what's happening in Baltimore at this time as it goes through revitalization. It reflects, again, the history, but it also reflects some of the possibilities of demonstrating, again, what African Americans have done for the city itself.
It's a real privilege to have Morgan back involved in the school, in the church. So it's a great legacy to know that Morgan has come back home when I have taken the helm of that church. That church is experiencing a renovation in its spirit, and in its physical plant, and in its cemetery, in all kinds of ways, because we're coming back home and doing the things that need to be done.
So it's a great challenge to be a part of the effort that's going to improve Mount Auburn Cemetery. Going to improve it so that it's a tourist site, it's a site, a place of beauty, a place of holiness, but also a place that people will brag about in future generations. With the help of Morgan State University and other kinds of people like the folk that we've met at Morgan, we can see more progress within 1 year than we've seen within 4, 5, or 6 previous years.